Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about an interesting subject. We're going to talk about mercenaries. So there are quite a few mercenaries, and we're going to start out with the Act 1 mercenary, which is the rogue. Kasha. So when you first start the game, there's going to be a quest to go kill the Blood Raven, and if you go kill the Blood Raven, you will get a mercenary for free. You can also hire new mercenaries. The mercenaries that you get in Act 1 will be a fire or a cold bow girl. That's what I like to call them, the bow girls. The level of the mercenary does go up with you. So as you level your character, you will notice that if you open up the mercenary panel with the letter O, you can actually look at the EXP on the character. Now the mercenary can never outlevel you. So if you are level 65, the mercenary will never go higher than level 65. The mercenary can fall behind very easily, so if you end up in a situation where you are much higher level than the mercenary, you'll find that the mercenary cannot level up very effectively. So you might want to go and hire a new one. There are some interesting things about mercenaries. They can be extremely useful. So for instance, with most mercenaries, you want to give them equipment. So if I have here a Hawkmail, would be a nice piece of equipment for them because it has cannot be frozen. Cannot be frozen is going to allow them to escape danger a little bit easier because when they get hit by those cold damage attacks, they're going to be able to run away. Of course, the AI on the mercs is not really that great. So just to point that out. Now, mercenaries are just as good as the equipment that you put on them. So if you want to make your mercenary a good mercenary, you're going to have to equip them with some gear. The better the gear, the better the mercenary. Each mercenary has his or her own abilities and talents. For instance, the Act 1 mercenary comes with the Amazon ability Inner Sight. So we are on Amazon right now, and we can take a look at that skill. Inner Sight is right here. It illuminates nearby targets, making them easier for you to hit, for you and your party to hit. So enemy defense negative 875, duration 88 seconds, increases the like the brightness of the enemy too, so you can see them easier. And they also come with two skills, either Cold Arrow or Fire Arrow. So we can go take a look at those. So Fire Arrow is right here. As you can see, it converts physical damage into elemental damage, so they get fire damage instead. And then Cold Arrow right here is also converts physical to cold. So we have basically two forms of elemental damage that the bow girl will also shoot. She's going to shoot regular attacks, and then she's also going to shoot the Fire Arrow and the Cold Arrow, as well as spam the Inner Sight. So if you're having trouble hitting things, maybe you're a melee character, and you need a little bit of extra attack rating, well, the Infravision will help you out there because it's going to reduce the defense of the target, and it's going to make it easier for you to hit them. Now, mercenaries are something that when you first start the game, you're not quite sure about, and you don't exactly know, how to use them. But trust me when I say that a well-geared, good level mercenary can be extremely useful. And there are even items in the game which will give mercenaries auras, and those auras will also affect you. So if you would give your mercenary a faith bow, for instance, which is a rune word, the faith bow has the fanaticism aura, which is on paladins, and that fanaticism aura will transfer to you and make your attacks faster and stronger as well. Next on the list is the Act 2 mercenary, and what is arguably the most useful of all of them. We're going to go take a look at him now. Alright, so here we are in Act 2, and in Act 2 you can find a guy on the map. His name is Grease. G-R-E-I-Z. Grease is the one that you hire Act 2 mercenaries from, and you would have to click on here and hire the mercenaries. There are three different types of mercenaries: the combat, the defensive, and the offensive. And they have extremely different abilities depending on which one you hire and where you hire them. So for instance, if you hire the combat mercenary in normal difficulty, he will have a prayer aura. But if you hire the combat difficulty, the combat merc in nightmare difficulty, he will have a thorns aura. In hell, he goes back to a prayer aura. In normal difficulty, if you hire the defense mercenary, he comes with defiance, and in nightmare, he comes with holy freeze. The offensive merc comes with Blessed Aim in normal difficulty, and in Nightmare difficulty he comes with Might. Now this is going to be a huge difference depending on what you want to do with the Mercenary. So for instance, Prayer is a regeneration of health. I generally find Prayer to be kind of useless unless you are maybe like a Necromancer with a giant army, because the effect of it is not as great as you would think. It's only a very small regeneration. The Thorns aura is very useful if you are a summoning Necromancer, but keep in mind that Thorns becomes quite useless in Hell difficulty. So while it might be useful to you in Nightmare and Normal, it's not going to help you out very much in Hell. And then with Defiance, Defiance is a huge increase to defense, and a huge increase to defense can actually be quite useful because it keeps the monsters from being able to hit you. I do find that Defiance mercs are tend to be more useful on characters where you don't want to be hit, like a melee character in the thick of it, or a maybe a summon Necromancer that doesn't work with Thorns. Holy Freeze is the Nightmare version of the defense merc, and Holy Freeze is one of the best abilities. I have it here on the Paladin, and you will see that Holy Freeze is a radial cold damage. It also adds cold damage to the attack of the person who's using it, and it slows the enemies around you by a percentage. So right now mine's level 5, and it slows the enemies by 42%. The very interesting thing about this slow is that it is not... What's the term? It is not resistible. There are actually very few monsters in the game that can even avoid this effect. And the enemies slowed is also stacked with other effects. So for instance, there are items in the game which will give slow by target enemies slowed, and they will stack with Holy Freeze. You can also get spells like Decrypify on the Necromancer, and the Clay Golem will also stack with this effect, and you can slow monsters down to a cap of 85%, which is pretty cool. And so this is a very interesting effect because a lot of people will build their characters around that Holy Freeze effect. Paladin actually has a very awesome Holy Freeze effect too. Next is the Blessed Aim Mercenary, and the Blessed Aim Mercenary is attack rating. So if you're in a position where you need a large amount of attack rating, Blessed Aim can come in handy for that. The Nightmare version of the offensive merc is Might, and Might is also a combat skill for Paladins. That is right here. As you can see, it is a damage increase. Does nothing else, but increases damage, and it's going to be your physical damage. So Might is going to help you out with your damage. Blessed Aim is going to help you out with your attack rating. Defiance is going to help you out with your defense. Holy Freeze is going to slow down enemies, make it a little bit harder for them to hit you so quickly. Prayer is going to regenerate your HP, and Thorns is going to bounce damage back to the targets. And like I said, Thorns is not so great in Hell. But it's a very effective merc for maybe like a Summon Necromancer or Summon Druid through Normal and Nightmare difficulty. And then we go to the Mercenaries attacks. So the Mercenary uses the Amazon skill Jab. The Amazon skill Jab is basically 3 quick thrusts, and it is very effective. He is a only polearm weapon user, okay? So he can only use spears and polearms, which means that you have to equip him with something that is a spear or a polearm. When you equip him with the items, his damage and his stats will reflect the item that you put on him. See, his damage goes way up here. He also can have items that proc damage effects on him. So for instance, this one has a 5% chance to cast level 15 Fade when struck, so that will cast that on him and will help out his damage. Also a 25% chance to cast level 15 Venom when striking, so that's going to increase his damage as well by giving him poison damage. It is important to give your mercenary some form of lifesteal. In my opinion, lifesteal is the one way that you can keep your mercenary alive. It is also important to note that mercenaries can die from poison. So players cannot die from poison. They actually go to 1 HP and they just sort of sit there. Whereas mercenaries can actually die from poison, and you have to be careful about that, because when you're in situations like inside the maggot lair or inside of the bowel throne room, and you're fighting the Act 2 mobs that give a huge amount of poison, they will eventually kill your mercenary if you're not careful. So watch out for that. Now, the Act 2 Mercenary is probably the most useful out of all the mercenaries in the game, And I would definitely recommend getting your hands on an Act 2 Mercenary for a lot of characters. There are arguments to use the Act 1 Mercenary or the Act 5 Mercenary over the Act 2, and you will find that there are situations where those are superior. But for the most part, the Act 2 Mercenary comes in the most handy because, number one, it functions as a tank. But number two, it functions as a a buff stick. Essentially, you can put items on it to give it auras and things like that, which will help it kill. Let me just show you real quick what it's like to have a little mercenary who runs around and kills stuff for you. It's pretty cool. So the mercenary's aura does not activate until a couple hits. So you'll see that he has no aura right now. But after a couple hits of damage, his aura will activate. There you go, and now his aura is on. Now, this is important to note because if you have just freshly resurrected your mercenary or you've just come into the game, it's going to take a couple hits for your mercenary's aura to turn on. Now this is the Holy Freeze aura that I was telling you about. It's one of the most useful ones that the mercenary has. Now there are other ones that you could use like Defiance or or Might or Holy, the Blessed Aim, depending on your circumstances. But a lot of people find that the Holy Freeze aura, how it makes monsters so slow, comes in very handy because number one, it makes it easier for you to chase them down. Number two, it slows them down, makes it harder for them to hit you. Number three, it does a constant amount of damage, which is cold damage, which also applies a chill to the monsters, as well as the slow. So chill and slow are two different effects, and they do actually stack together. As you can see here, he's fairly OP in this difficulty. My particular mercenary here is level 92 because I am also level 92. So I have him at my current level, and I have geared him as well as I possibly can at this point. This is a ladder reset. It's only about 13 days into the ladder. So he has a Treachery, he has a Tal Raush's Rogic Crest, which could be better. He could be using like an Andariel's Mask or something. And I have him a Tomb Reaver Cryptic Axe, which gives him tons of damage, lifesteal, all resistances, and even a chance to reanimate the dead as little skeletons, which is pretty cool. See my little skeletons here running around. So I think we've talked enough about the Act 2 Mercenary. Let's go talk about the Act 3 Mercenary. Alright, so here we are in Act 3, and in Act 3 you will find a half-naked lady named Ashira, and Ashira is the one who gets the Iron Wolves. The Iron Wolves are the mercenaries for this particular Act, Act 3, and you can get a Fire, a Lightning, or a Cold Mercenary. Now the Fire, Lightning, and Cold Mercenaries are capable of using spells. The Fire Mercenary can use Inferno and Fireball. The Cold Mercenary can use Glacial Spike and Ice Blast, as well as Frozen Armor. The Lightning Mercenary can use Charge Bolt and Lightning Bolt. Now, they do cast their spells, but they don't cast them as often. They can hit with their sword, which is very odd. And despite the fact that they use a shield, they cannot block. In fact, let me just go ahead and say this right now. Despite the fact that the mercenary has shields, none of the mercenaries can actually block attacks. One of the interesting things about the Act 3 Mercenary is that it is one of the 2 mercenaries that can actually fit a full set of armor on it and benefit from the entire effects. So the Eisenheart set is one of those sets. It is a 4-piece set, and because the mercenary can wield 4 pieces, it is the only mercenary that can have 4 pieces of gear, you can actually put the entire set on him, and he can get all the effects of the armor. Alright, and it is important to gear up your mercenary because it is going to help him tremendously. Now the Act 3 Mercenary is generally one that is laughed at because the Act 3 Mercenary is probably the most useless. And it came about because of, in Diablo 2, when Diablo 2 originally came out, there were no synergies. Synergies are basically bonuses between skills which allow your skills to be more effective. Like you see here, Holy Freeze gains 15% cold damage from Resist Cold. Well, the Sorceress has a whole bunch of synergies now, and the HP of monsters was increased to accommodate those synergies, but the Act 3 Mercenary just kind of got left in the dust. And because of this, the Act 3 Mercenary is probably the least useful out of the whole lot. Also, the fire one has the Inferno spell, and Inferno is actually very useless as well as a spell. So if you were to get one of these and you wanted to just play around with it, my suggestion would be to get the cold one. The cold one is capable of using Glacial Spike and Ice Blast, which are both freezing effects. So at the very least, it will be useful to you in the terms of freezing monsters. And when a monster is frozen, they're completely stiff for a certain period of time. Glacial Spike is an AoE freeze, and Ice Blast is a single target that lasts longer. So your cold merc is probably going to be more useful than any of the mercs that you're going to get. There's really not much more to say about these mercenaries. They are difficult to build. That one advantage of having 4 slots would provide you with the ability to put 4 auras on this monstrosity of a mercenary. So think about this: if you had 4 different rune words, and each one of these rune words or items had a different aura on it, you could have 4 auras running at the same time on this mercenary. Now, of course, you can do the same thing on the Act 2 mercenaries, because the Act 2 mercenaries already come with an aura, and even though they're only capable of using 3 items, you can put 3 items on them to give them 3 auras, and then they could be using their own aura that you hired them with. Now, this one does give you a little bit more customization, obviously, because you can put 4 different auras, and you don't have to, stand with the stock aura. But it is very difficult to get exactly what auras you want, since you only have 4 slots. So let's move on to the Act 5 Mercenary. This is going to be the last one. The Act 5 Mercenary is probably one of the most useful ones as well, and you'll see why. Alright, now in Act 5, you will find a man. His name is called Qualkek. And Qualkek gives you a quest to go and rescue the barbarians that are trapped in the Mount Ariat area. So basically there you'll find a whole bunch of barbarians, and they're all trapped inside these wooden cages, and you gotta go rescue them. And once you rescue them, he will offer you the ability to hire one of his mercenaries. And you'll see here he has no real difference between them other than the names. When you hire your barbarian mercenary, the barbarian is capable of wielding 2-handed weapons and 1-handed weapons. He is able to use a armor and a helmet. And one of the unique things about the Act 5 Mercenary is that the Act 5 Mercenary is capable of using an entire set. Actually a fairly decent one too. It is Sazabi's set. Sazabi's set has some very interesting effects, like pretty good resistances, increased to maximum life, which is 27% by the set. So as you see here, he has 2,139 life, and when I take off the a piece, it goes down to 1,610. So a very nice way to keep him alive. 30% faster recovery is going to help you out a lot there too, and 40% increased attack speed. Now, granted, it's not the best piece, gear to put on your mercenary, but it's just fun that you can put an entire set on your mercenary, and it actually does make him pretty strong. But later game, you're probably going to find much better gear to put on your mercenary than that. Now, the Act 5 Mercenary has 2 main skills. He will utilize the Bash skill, which is on the Barbarian skill tree here. So Bash is a damage effect which kind of knocks back the enemy, which is very useful for certain classes. If you are a sorceress, I definitely recommend using a Bash Mercenary because it works amazing. You just teleport around, and he teleports with you, and then when you stop or you get into the middle of monsters, he'll start bashing things away from you, and it will definitely help you to get to places easier on your sorceress. Now, granted, most sorceresses are trying to use an insight pole arm for that meditation effect, but trust me when I say that until you get that, the Bash Mercenary can be very helpful if you're just trying to teleport through stuff. He also has the stun ability, which is right here. Stuns your target for a short time, increasing your attack rating. So he has 2 very useful effects for crowd control, essentially. So if you're in a situation where you need a little bit of crowd control, he's going to knock things away from you, and he's also going to stun them. I find that he is not the best as far as damage is concerned, because when you knock something back, you have to chase it, and then you have to hit it again. So it's a little bit counterintuitive as far as like a DPS string, if you're trying to attack something over and over again. But I do find that he's able to stun lock things and knock things back very effectively, so if that's what you're going for, he can definitely get that done. Now, It is important to note, now that we've talked about each one of these mercenaries, let's talk about their individual stats. So the mercenaries all have their own breakpoints. They all have their own HP and defense, as well as their resistances will go up with the level that, as they increase in level. So you want to try and get their resistances up. You want to try and give them some life steal. You're going to want to try and get them as much life as possible and as much damage as possible so that they can be useful. Definitely make sure you are equipping them with stuff that makes sense. For instance, with the Barbarian, he uses two-handed weapons. So unless you were using this particular set, which has a one-handed, sword in it, or you just happen to have a godlike one-handed sword to give him for the moment, try to equip him with a two-handed weapon because it's going to have the most effect on him. It's going to give him the most damage. With the Act 2 Mercenary, the Act 2 Mercenary is able to use pole arms, so make sure you find him a very nice pole arm with some lifesteal. Another important thing to note about mercenaries is ethereal items. So when you find an ethereal items are items that have enhanced stats, like increased defense or increased damage, but once they break, they're gone forever. And you might be hesitant to use those on your character. Well, let me tell you, hold on to those ethereal items and put them on your mercenary. Because believe it or not, your mercenary does not use durability of items. So no matter how much your mercenary gets beat down, no matter how much he slices up the enemy with his sword, the sword or his armor will not decrease in durability. This is a special effect that mercenaries have. So, for instance, if I were to find an ethereal Sotheby's Liberator, an ethereal Sotheby's Mental Sheath, and an ethereal Cobble Redeemer, I might put all those pieces that are ethereal on a mercenary and let him have a very strong, beefed up set. Because the defense on the plate would be increased by 50%, the defense on the armor, the helmet would be increased by 50%, and the damage on the sword would also be increased. So it would be a very nice set for a mercenary. Not something that I would specifically want to use because those pieces would break and then they would be gone forever. But on a mercenary, they're going to be extremely useful to the mercenary due to those ethereal effects. Also, when you're leveling up your mercenary, I have noticed that if you are mismatched levels, you're going to have a very hard time leveling up your mercenary. So, if I'm like level 90 and I have a level 40 mercenary, what you're probably going to want to do is you're probably going to want to hire a new one. So you'll find that if you are in, for instance, level 99, like my character is, and you go over to a mercenary, no matter where you are, and you click hire, the mercenaries that he will show you will be more around your level. So I could, for instance, take this level 89 mercenary that I currently have. I could take the armor and stuff off, and we can go up to him and we can buy a new one. Now keep in mind that when your mercenary dies, he is not dead forever, so you can resurrect him. So let's go ahead and hire this level 98 mercenary. So you see now we have a level 98 mercenary. So the death of the mercenary. If your mercenary dies, do not cry. Do not have a fit. You can go back to town. Any of the mercenary people, doesn't matter which one. You can go to Chinchilla. You can go to the Act 2 Grease. You can go to the Act 3 Iron Wolf Girl, which is right here, which is Ashira. You can also, even in Act 4, even though there is no mercenary for Act 4, because my Act 4 is hell, you can go to Tyrael, and Tyrael will resurrect your mercenaries. So if you go to the Pandemonium Fortress, Tyrael is right here, and he will have an option. If your mercenary is dead, he will have an option that says Resurrect Mercenary. Or you can go, obviously, to Qualkek in Act 5. And he will charge you a fee to resurrect your mercenary. The fee depends on what level your mercenary is. So it's very important to note that if you have a very high level mercenary, it can cost 50,000 gold or more to resurrect your mercenary. So it's going to be very costly. So try and save your mercenary at all costs. Now, one thing you can do to try and save your mercenary is you can feed them potions. So if you hold down the shift key, when you click on a potion, it will give it to your mercenary instead. And your mercenary will actually thank you for it. So you'll actually hear him say, "Thank you. Thanks. Thank you," as you feed him potions. So I'm going to go out here into the wilds, and we're going to feed him a potion.
Thanks.
See, and he says, Thank you. Mercenaries do not have mana, so you do not have to worry about feeding them mana potions, only health potions. And the health potions work exactly on us as they do on them. So, you know, if he's really badly wounded, you're going to have to give him more potions. It is also important to note that if you die, your mercenary will die with you. So it's very important for you to stay alive if you want to keep your mercenary alive. As you can see, I just died here, and my mercenary is gone. And if I wanted to resurrect my mercenary, I would have to go to Qualkick and pay him the money to resurrect him. And right now, I don't have the money, so not allowed. Now, it is important to note that all that equipment that you have on the mercenary is stuck on the mercenary until you resurrect him. And if you hire a new mercenary, all that equipment will be lost. So you need to make sure that you rehire your old mercenary first, take off the equipment that you have on your mercenary, and then hire your new one if that's what you plan to do. Now, I'm going to go over some brief things about the mercenaries. We're just going to talk about them real quick. And let me go back to one of my characters that has a mercenary. So I'm going to go to my my paladin here, who has a fairly nice mercenary running. And we're going to talk about all these effects. So, first off, Prevent Monster Heal, which is a very nice effect for players, does not work on mercenaries. So if you have a piece of equipment that gives Prevent Monster Heal, please note that Prevent Monster Heal will not work on the mercenary. Most other mods, like Crushing Blow, Open Wounds, Chance to Cast on Striking, Faster Cast, Fast Rate Recovery, Increased Attack Speed, all that will work on your mercenary. Mercenaries hired in normal difficulty actually have slightly better stats than those hired in Nightmare and Hell. So if you are going to hire a mercenary, I suggest you do it in normal Nightmare, or normal difficulty, as opposed to Nightmare and Hell. Now, if you are hiring an Act 2 Nightmare mercenary specifically for the auras, then you have no choice. But keep in mind that if you are hiring like a Defiance Act 2 mercenary, I suggest you do it in normal so you get the higher stats. The highest level that mercenaries can be is level 98. All right. Act 5 mercenaries actually regenerate faster than Act 2 and Act 1 mercenaries. So if they're hurt or something like that, you will notice that the Act 5 mercenaries will regenerate all their health much quicker. Mercenaries do actually benefit from plus skill items. So their effects are much like ours. So if you see they have Holy Freeze, if this particular merc has Holy Freeze and you put an item on him which has plus to all skills, it will beef up the damage and the radius of Holy Freeze. Same thing with the Act 1 mercenaries. It'll beef up their fire arrow, their cold arrow, their infravision. The Act 5 mercenaries will beef up their bash and their stun level. So that's always important to note. Now, you can also give them enchant. So you can enchant them, which will increase their attack rating and their damage. And you can use even rejuvenation potions on them, which is very nice. So, if your mercenary is in trouble and you really need to save him, you can put a couple rejuvenation potions up there, by holding shift and right-clicking, and that will increase his health dramatically. Magic Find is another interesting topic here. So mercenaries actually will take your Magic Find and use it. And what happens with Magic Find is it adds to your total. If your mercenary kills the monster. So for instance, if I have 35% Magic Find on a pair of boots, and I'm running a mercenary who has 62% Magic Find on his polearm, and the two items are going to combine. So if my mercenary kills someone, the 35% is going to add to the 62%, and he's going to end up with 60, 70, 80, 90, 67. So 97% Magic Find. So it's actually very, very effective if you want to build Magic Find on your mercenary and have it so that he can kill things. That way you can have Magic Find on your character, your mercenary has Magic Find on him, and you are going to have him kill the monster, though. Now, it is important to note, though, that if your mercenary can't kill anything, well, their Magic Find's not going to be very useful. It's also important to note that mercenaries receive a huge amount of extra damage versus bosses. So when they fight Bloodraven, Andariel, Duriel, Mephisto, Diablo, Baal, Baal's clone, and Diablo's clone, as well as Neelathak, Iswal, Radamant. It's a pretty long list. So basically, anybody that is considered a boss, they receive 200% extra damage, and they die very quickly. So your mercenary needs to be very tanky to be able to survive a boss. So don't be surprised if your mercenary gets tanked, gets immediately murdered by, Diablo or Mephisto or something like that. They kind of programmed it into the game to make sure that the mercenary is having a really hard time versus those targets. Now, if you build your mercenary correctly, though, they can usually hang in there. They usually have pretty good resistances because their resistances go up by level, which I wish our character resistances went up by level, but that's not something that happens. And in this way, you can definitely build them to be extremely tanky, have lots of magic find, and help you out in many, many ways. Another interesting thing about mercenaries is they have breakpoints, just the same way that characters do, and we're going to talk about that. All right, now since mercenaries cannot block, there's only two breakpoints that you really need to worry about, and that is the faster hit recovery breakpoint. And let's go over the terrible breakpoints for these guys. So the Act III Mercenary has the worst hit recovery, probably out of everybody and everything in the game. Without any faster hit recovery gear, he has a 17 frame hit recovery, which means that your Act III Mercenary is not going to be able to tank a whole lot. He's going to be hit, stunned all the time, and he's going to be killed very easily. So if you do plan on using an Act III Mercenary, I would definitely recommend that you get him at least about 63% faster hit recovery, which is going to bring him up to 9 frames, which is going to be a heck of a lot better than 17 frames that he starts out at. The Act II Mercenary is the second worst in hit recovery, and he is one that also needs a little bit of hit recovery to make himself not get murdered. You can also counter hit recovery stuns by building defense because it prevents the monster from being hit. But keep in mind that the faster your mercenary can recover from a hit, the better. The Act II Mercenary starts at 15 frames, which is also very terrible. There's only one character in the entire game that has a 15 frame hit recovery also, and that's Sorceress. Sorceress's hit recovery is also absolutely terrible. So you're going to want to bring up the hit recovery of your Act II Mercenary a little bit. 42% hit recovery increase will get him to 9 frames. You probably aren't going to bring him up much past 9 frames, but 60% would get him to 8 frames. So that would be very helpful to him as far as recovering from hits. Now, the Act I Mercenary has pretty good hit recovery. He starts out at 11 frames, and you can get him to all the way up to 6 frames with only 52% hit recovery. And the Act V Mercenary, or sorry, that was the Act I Mercenary that I was talking about. The Act V Mercenary has very good hit recovery as well. He starts out at 9 frames, and with only a small amount of hit recovery, with only 27% hit recovery, you can get him up to 6 frames, which is pretty good. So as you can see, the Act V Mercenary is really the one that is a lot more tanky, I guess. Just simply because of the fact that with just a bare minimum amount of hit recovery, you can get him up to a very agreeable level. The other thing that you really want to worry about for mercenaries is the attack speed. So the Act I, the Act II, and the Act V mercenaries are all going to greatly benefit from attack speed, which is going to increase the speed that they're hitting the target. Now, attack speed is a very complicated subject because it goes over what weapon the person is using, the attack speed on the weapon, the attack speed bonuses of the weapon, the attack speed on your gear, any auras that are applicable. So it's going to be a very complicated subject, and it's something you're going to have to research in advance. But trust me when I say that more attack speed on your mercenary can be very useful. However, because of the way that breakpoints work, for instance, if I were to build up the mercenary's hit recovery, he has a breakpoint at 10 frames, which is 46%, and if I bring him up to 56%, it does nothing. I have to hit 63 faster hit recovery to hit the next frames, which is 9. If you're interested in learning about hit recovery frames or breakpoints in general, I do have an entire video on breakpoints, and it'll be down in the description for you if you're interested. Now, build up your mercenaries faster hit recovery, your mercenaries attack speed, and that's definitely going to be helpful. The only mercenary that is probably going to benefit from faster cast is going to be the Act 3 Mercenary. And not a lot of people actually build the Act 3 Mercenary because he is very difficult to make useful. You'll find that the Act 2 or the Act 5 or the Act 1 Mercenary are far more useful than the Act 3. And the Act 2 Mercenary tends to be the crowd favorite. All right, now I hope that you guys and gals have gotten a little bit of information from this. And I will say that there is a lot more to learn here. The mercenaries are a very valuable resource, and they can be built very, very effectively. For instance, here I have a gemmed kraken shell, which I am currently working on. And once I can get myself a low rune, this will turn into the rune word Fortitude. And because it is ethereal, it has a huge amount of defense, and that defense will help out my mercenary immensely. Plus, the rune word is going to apply even more defense on top of that. You can equip your mercenary with things which will make them godlike, which will help you out immensely. And I hope that at least one thing that I have struck in your mind is that, hey, mercenaries can be useful. And you might be asking yourself why I made this guide in the first place. You know, aren't mercenaries something that everybody knows about? Well, as I watched the Diablo II Resurrected videos and I started to see, the newer players get into the game, what I realized was that the newer players had absolutely no idea how to use the mercenaries at all. And oftentimes they would, curse at the mercenaries, call them useless, and laugh as they died. And it made me feel kind of sad because, the mercenaries can be very useful if you equip them properly, if you get them the right gear and you set them up with with a couple potions now and then, and make sure that they're not dying from poison, things like that. They can be extremely useful, and they also benefit from your auras as well. So if you are using something like Might, you'll notice that as you go outside of town, they will also obtain your Might aura. Or, if you happen to have abilities that will heal your mercenary, like for instance, if you're a paladin and you have like a cleansing aura, you can cleanse their poison, or you can make them run faster with vigor, or give them more defense. And you can actually set up your mercenary to do quite a bit of damage. Like for instance, if I was a zeal paladin and I used the aura fanaticism, my fanaticism aura would be helping out my mercenary as well, which would be very, very useful. And as always, I do appreciate you guys watching my videos, and keep watching.
He's a little bully. He's like a little bully, aren't you? Not the cute little bullies. Little